That's who wins in America. All right? If you're not going to do the work, then it sucks. Koreans, you don't see them in politics. Guess what? We don't expect political shit from anybody. All right? We know what the games that are being played. Our population is way too small. We're never going to be there. So we don't even try. We invest in other shit. We go into the private sector. We make our private associations. We make our churches. All right? Because we know we're never going to have political parity. Unless we outspent every other group of people and literally spent every last dollar we saved into doing that. And sold off all our possessions. Maybe we would have a chance. All right? Fucking look around you, bro.
All right, so now that you're done, doing PR.
No, you're done. So you're done for the next few hours, bro. You gotta take a break. You're done for the next hour. We focused on you for like the last 2 hours, bro. Chill. As McZed or Good, did you want to say something? Or anybody else?
Lost my train of thought. Yeah.
So what the fuck? If they not gonna say nothing, let me speak, nigga.
Nah, bro. We have to go backwards to educate you, and then it's just.
We don't gotta talk about white supremacy. I get it. It makes your vagina tingle, so we don't have to deal with that. We can deal with the.
Okay. Damn, that voice is grating, bro. Bro, I'm gonna play you. I'm gonna send you the voice messages he left me. He left me like 7 messages. Like, oh, that's how it is, Gio. You're not gonna answer me, bro. I don't even use this account like that. Holy fucking shit, bro. He left me like 7 voice DMs. Like, yo, Gio, I love your knowledge. Let's talk, bro. And then he left like 7 because I guess I didn't answer him. And by the 4th message, it's like, oh, that's how it is, you bitch ass chick. That's how it is. Oh, you're not gonna answer the black man because he black. I'm like, oh my fucking god, yo, it's like an ex-girl.
That's it. You guys want to be over. We need more Gio and Adam rooms, guys.
No, Adam doesn't like this shit. He wouldn't like it. That's why it has to be my room where Adam just joins rather than a room that he and I make together. That's the room you want to join. But anybody else? Let's get some new voices in here, bro.
I was gonna say really quickly. I just want to say that thank you guys. You provided the best point for me. I'm off to work, but it's been amazing. And
thank you.
Mo 687.
What's up, everybody?
You called
What's
me
up, bro?
racist.
Yeah.
Black Air Forces.
CRT or War Daddy, you guys want to
Menace to
contribute
society.
while you have a chance and opportunity to do it.
Who's CRT?
No idea. I was thinking
Good morning, everyone. This is CRT. I'm an educational expert. I recently started a new business. It's called CRT Education, and Jazzy is our first hire. We're very excited. We believe that African Americans on this app are disenfranchised, and as a result, we want to give them jobs to franchise them. We're offering franchise opportunities in every major Democrat-controlled super city. If you are a Democrat brainwashed clown moron and looking for an exciting new career employment opportunity, contact CRT Education today. Call us at 312-498-0517 or email your resume to crteducation@gmail.com. We look forward to working with you and the Democrat and Republican children that you will brainwash. Ribono Shaloilo.
Hey, you know what's fucking sick about that? About what we just heard? He's not reading on this the script. He fucking memorized it.
no, he freestyles it because he does it for every business and he switches out the fucking few words and exchanges it. It's not that hard, dude. Oh, Jesus Christ.
Well, basically, hold on. I'll just say one thing is that I have
it does. It takes creativity.
CRT is technically what everybody is doing on this app. You know, if you're black, the whole thing. Yeah, he's a CRT. Everyone has their.
Exactly. The teachers have been doing this in our schools for decades. I went to a school where I had 3 teachers. When I asked them for book recommendations, and I was more like a fictional reader back then, they would recommend me Howard Zinn's History of the World like 3 fucking times. Jesus fucking Christ, bro. Michael Moore books, and all that shit. But you know what I did, Goo? You know how based I am? I went to get the Michael Moore book, and right next to it in the politics section was Bill O'Reilly's No Spin Zone book. I took both home and read both sides. And I'm like, damn, I agree the most anti-aristocratic monarchic people who are like, we can do it if you guys just get your boots off our neck, ended up like doing everything that every aristocratic class ever did in human history, like the same fucking things, you know. I don't know, man. This country is bad.
So we are all in concurrence that it is the liberal Democrats that are ruining everything, correct?
Yes. But the conservatives hold water for the liberals. Let me explain how. Let me give you an example, right? Yes, but here's a red pill. I'm gonna black pill the shit out of you. I'm gonna have you laughing by the end of this. Ready? This is an argument I didn't make, but Aaron McIntyre made, and it's so fucking good. He's like, as much as I love the Second Amendment, the conservatives who defend the Second Amendment are actually against their own interests, because number one, the right of revolution and the right to do it with a gun, it's a Jeffersonian idea, right? And it's the idea that we should revolt against the government, right? But ironically, conservatives generally don't do that. It's not in their disposition, in their ideology, etc., etc., etc. But what they're doing then is always defending the leftist group of people to revolt in riots, okay? But as we know in American history, all the conservatives keep saying, if we have the guns, we'll be able to defend ourselves, right? But if we look at American history, every violent rebellion was put down by state and federal governments, right? Liza's Rebellion, Whiskey Rebellion, Shays Rebellion, Nat Turner's Rebellion, John Brown's Rebellion, they were all put down violently, yes or no?
Yes.
So in reality, conservatives are only defending the leftist right to violent revolt, while simultaneously never rioting in cities, never doing what the lefties do with the same power. That the conservatives are defending the lefties, but the reverse would never be done for them.
I like to call this the Lindsey Graham effect. I mean, Tucker Carlson is saying that Lindsey Graham suffers from a syndrome because he has no children. As a result, he wants to sell more F-35s to Turkey. So this is the problem with being a childless homosexual who sucks dick for breakfast.
Yeah, and that is a problem with gays, because as a liberal, I never understood that. And even in the last few years, I didn't understand that, because the arguments are so old for why gays weren't allowed in the main society in most of these societies that we don't even have the arguments left over anymore. But as I'm thinking more and more about this, there was a guy named Larry Kramer, who's a gay activist from the 70s, who was vocal because he was one of the few gays who was saying, look, the gays we as gays have to admit that we're so short-sighted. All we do is live the quick lifestyle, quick sex, quick drugs, quick alcohol, quick degeneracy, nightclubs, short-term flinky things. Why isn't it that we can't grow up and have a family, be part of society, go join associations, be involved in all these things? And he says maybe this is why HIV spreads so much in our community, because we are so irresponsible. Gays like that are extremely rare, and they're silent in our society. And there's a lot of gays who hate gay culture as it is, that gay, fast, loose gay culture I'm talking about. And the inability for gays to self-criticize themselves at a mass level, and the fact that they won't generally have children so that they don't have a long-term investment within society, they are more able to and willing to go for short-term interests for their own personal self at their lifetime rather than the future, because families vote for future interests. People who live a quick lifestyle don't vote for long-term interests. They just want to get as much as they can from the government right now, all the help, all the benefits, and then they don't care what the costs and consequences of that are in the future. And I think that's a very good argument as to why gays shouldn't have the right to vote in this country. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. They're Peter Pan children. They're the lost boys. They want to be children forever. And that group of people should not have the right to vote, because they don't care about our children's interests, our grandchildren's interests, or our great-grandchildren's interests.
Okay, that's bullshit. I have nephews, and I'm a homosexual, and I care about their.
You're a rarity, Ryan.
I'm sure any gay man who has nephews doesn't want their or nieces or whatever, their neighbors' kids. It's not like they've never seen a child before.
Yes, but their interest in the child isn't as close as a parent's is. That's directly financially obligated, legally obligated. It's a different relationship. It's like grandparents who can be dote on their grandchildren and give them sugar and candy, even though the parents are trying to wean them off it, let's say. The grandparents will secretly sneak the candy to them because they can be the good guy and they can leave like tomorrow, go back home and not have to deal with the sugar rush that they get. Whereas the parents, who have the long-term interest in the child because they have to deal with them every day, they're going to say, hey, no sugar. I don't care what your grandparents say no. And then the kid will sneak off until when their parents are busy in the kitchen and go to his grandma and ask her for her kids that she keeps in her purse, right? And then the grandma will whisper, shh, don't tell your mom, and give it to them. This is the same problem, and this is even within like the same three generation of people right here that I'm even telling you that even grandparents can be a little bit too doting on their grandchildren. So I'm not making this argument lightly. I'm accepting that this happens at different levels of society. You know, your uncle that you haven't seen in 20 years doesn't care about you as much as someone you see every day as an uncle, right? And I'm not denying that there are some gays who are conservative, who put family first, who do all these things. I never said it was all gays. I said generally do so. And this was even Larry Kramer. Me and Adam was listening to an interview with him, and he sounds like the gay Jordan Peterson. He says, why don't we clean up our own homes first? Why are we always so quick-sighted? Why are we going to degenerate places all the time? You know, why can't we be normal members of society?
Gio, if we were to end the wars and focus internally, like what should we actually do with our resources and in terms of policing our degenerate population?
That's such a hard question because it would depend on what type of government we have. Do we start focusing on the states more? Does the federal power recede as this global economy kind of slows down in some ways? I don't know. That's such a wide question. What could we do? I mean, Bukele is a good example of what a liberal, leaders should be doing. If you want to be liberal and you want to maintain your society, you have to be willing to do the types of things Bukele is doing in El Salvador. Lock up criminals, defend your borders, do what's in your own country's interest without thinking about other people. These are the types of things that liberals could and should be doing. And if they had been doing this, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in. Right? But for me, the liberal ideology ordains this to happen. Even in Christianity, we've had the progressive kind of version of Christianity, and the Catholic Church called it a heresy. It's called Pelagianism, and that was woke Christianity that had been around since like 300 AD. So even this type of woke Christianity has been around even 2,000 years ago, but the Catholic Church was smart enough to say this is heresy and ban it. But we don't have that type of moral authority anymore over the Protestant Church. So now the Protestants can be as heretical as possible, twist Christianity into an ideology where you're supposed to bring heaven on earth instead of waiting for Jesus to come back and making, not saying that you can't have heaven on earth. These New Age Christians think that you can literally perfect humanity and get rid of poverty and misery.
Yeah, but that's the same thing for the atheist Marxist socialists. They same exact perspective.
Correct. You know why though? Because the socialists are an early reaction against liberalism. Even in the 1780s, there are proto-socialists who are writing against Rousseau in 1750-60 French Enlightenment liberals. And the first proto-socialists are people like Fourier, Beppu, Saint-Simon, Robert Owen in Britain in the 1810s, 20s, 30s. Dude, this guy was brought in by the American government to try out a co-op corporate town where everything would be provided for you, right? And then you just have to work there. And he brought all these random people together from all groups of life in Indiana and he was a very successful factory owner in England, and so he had a lot of money. He decided to replicate what he did in England in America, and within 1 year, all the young men left because they're like, why are we doing all this physical factory work when we don't know who and like all the other like old people and children are benefiting? They're not our children. We don't know these people. Why are we doing all this backbreaking work for strangers? In England, they worked because each neighborhood was all their people from their own neighborhood, and they had a common cause, common religion. In America, it didn't work because he brought people from all different places, people who were on the side of the street, people who had just lost their jobs in the north, brought them all together, got together enough people to start his factory. And these so-called co-op ideas that liberals, socialists still cling to this day is not a new idea. It's been around since like the 1780s, my dude. Like proto-socialists have been around since the 1780s. Marx came around in the 1860s. There's a French socialism, and then there's Marxist socialism. Then there's American socialism, which is progressivism. There's 3 strains of fucking leftism, y'all.
Is
And
Marxism
y'all keep thinking it's just
neo-proto?
Marxism.
Is Marxism neo-socialism, and then the French Revolution is
Yeah, but it's during
proto-Marxism?
that specific time period when a lot of the labor were in factories, and the factories were pretty brutal in some ways. Marxist socialism was for that time period as a reaction against capitalist liberalism of like everything in England, everybody in the 1830s and 60s got sent to the cities to work in factories. They took over all the government land and they started buying their wheat. They basically got rid of all the farmers, turned them into sheep herders, the ones who wanted to stay, sent the rest into cities, which is what happened with China too, right? And in America too. And they deracinated a whole group of their people. And in the 1830s and 60s, they started buying their wheat from France, Belgium, and Ireland because it was cheaper. That's when the conservatives lost the argument against free trade, by the way. That's when 99.9% of the conservative intellectuals changed sides from conservative British to the liberal British party, including Blackstone. Who was the leader of before Benjamin Disraeli? Who was the
Mr. Pence, or whatever his name was. Pitts.
No,
Pitts.
no,
Mr.
it
Pitts.
wasn't Pitt. Hold up. Corn law debates. Give me 1 second. No, it's he was the last conservative intellectual, actually. One of the last conservative intellectuals, leader of the Conservative Party. So what happened at that instance is that when they were debating the corn laws, the leader of the Conservative Party, Robert Peel, that's it, Robert Peel, he turns to his second in command in the party and says, bro, you're going to have to answer this question. I think they're right on this, and I think I agree with them on this. And he took 90% of the conservative intellectuals so that the only people remaining in the Conservative Party were the landowners, who had just lost all their jobs, who were going to lose all their jobs. Does that sound familiar?
Yes.
That's like all the industrial, sector leaving America to go to other countries.
Gio,
This was lost in Britain in 1830s to the 1860s, 100 years before America. We should have seen this coming, bro.
Gio,
If our leaders who are smart enough, they would have seen this coming. Go ahead.
can I just say that, with regards to the title about Canadian politics, clown world, it's the same thing here in America, where politics, and in terms of linguistic, theory or understanding, I like to say that all communication is hypnosis. I read it in a book about communication theory.
Bernays and them saying that
Right,
they were
the Hegelian,
basically, intellectualizing how to manipulate people.
right, the Hegelian dialect,
And
but
turning it into a science, correct?
well, into a science. But my point is,
By the way, everything is a Hegelian dialect at this point. All
Yes.
these liberal governments are all Hegelian dialects.
yes,
Like
yes,
even Plato was a Hegelian in that sense because he used to go around to different cities and been like, bro, if you were this type of government, you would be better. Oh, if you were this type of government, that
Yeah.
would be a better government for you. And he's retarded because he doesn't understand that the government is that way because of those people and their decisions and their culture and their history. And he thinks that he can just put a new government on top of them and perfect them and make them into a golden age. And that's
But-
like saying we can turn Afghanistan into a democracy.
but that's
Bro,
like
Plato is a Hegelian too then, which means that we've been Hegelians for over 2,000 years because
yeah,
if synthesis and the synthesis, all that shit, that was the justification for the republic, for the Romans and the Greeks and the Greek Athenian democracy.
But
That they could be better than what they were before, right? So that means we've been Hegelian. Western civilization in its entirety is Hegelian because they merged Christianity with paganism, with Roman civics, and turned it into a new identity.
yes,
That's
look at Korea and China though. Less Hegelian, more about compromise, and less about tomfoolery, lies, and misinformation.
Yeah, more pragmatic in certain ways, but then their leadership has been really shitty for the last 50 years in Korea and 100 years in China.
It may be shit.
Besides Deng was a little bit better. Deng was the shining star of the CCP, honestly. But go ahead.
Do you think Korea was better as a military dictatorship?
Yes, 100%. Like, you know how all the liberal economists claim that Korea is an example of the liberal economy working? Partially they're right. I'll give them their due that partially they're not wrong, right? But they forget that Korea was, for 30, 40 years, a military dictatorship. They forget that the miracle of the Han River was a result of the 40 years of policy. They forget that Korea invested more into their education than any country in their history of the world. Literally 20% of their GDP, tax revenue went to education. No country has ever done this, but they knew they had to catch up with everybody else and get on a high level, right?
And
This was done by beating kids and people from rural areas that had never been educated. They had to beat these people into sitting still because they weren't used to it. So many Koreans have horror stories about being beaten, because they were trying to turn an agricultural people into an industrial and intelligentsia in one generation.
But look at the TikTok cell phone. Hold on, Kevin. Look at the TikTok cell phone users of today. You got to beat them too.
Just real quick though, to Kevin's question, yes, I think that everything good about Korea right now, almost everything, has to be attributed. Their economy boom, their literacy rate is all due to the military dictatorship.
If that got
Like a shuttle
started
system.
though, once you
Yeah.
get to that point and your population is at a certain level of wealth and education, I think it's natural that people start pressing for more freedoms and democracy and these things. So I would agree.
I don't disagree with that.
Yeah, and one point that I would make is that kind of the lie of free trade, and I'm a very pro free trade person, is
Yeah, I'm
that
not completely
if you
anti-free
let-
trade either.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
always an element of some free trade.
if you
right?
let enough, every country I believe has to start somewhere, and often it's starting at a place of doing the kind of labor that other countries don't want to do because they're
Yes,
past that
yes.
stage of development. And it's very
Yes.
real quick, can I finish my real quick?
Yes.
And I think the lie of a lot of free trade people is that, well, if you let a country make t-shirts or do whatever, in 30 years they're going to be developed. And that's not really the case. I mean, you have to, it's on the public policy, it's on the, whatever kind
Once
of
they
system it
invest
is.
one
Yeah,
sector, one industry.
Exactly.
Yes,
The free trade creates wealth, but then that wealth has to be invested in increasing the productive capacity of the people, making them smarter, making them better workers.
Because especially because Korea and Japan have so little resources, this applies to them immensely, right? Because it's not like they have some natural resource they can fall back upon. They didn't, so they had.
I think it's actually an advantage. I think that the
It
resource
is.
curse,
In a
the
capitalist
resource-
world,
the
it is an
resource-
advantage.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
resource curse is a very real thing, and institutions in resource-rich economies tend to
They get
develop.
lazy.
Yeah, well, they
Look at
develop.
Venezuela.
They
Look at
develop,
Venezuela.
They develop highly extractive, basically like kleptocracies, where you have like this elite of people that have control over the natural resources, and there's very little incentive to invest in the people. It's basically just how can we? It's what's the word I'm looking for? It's rent seeking. It's just rent seeking, clientelistic behavior of how can we suck as much value out of the earth, and how can we suck as much value out of our population, as opposed to like the investing in the people and stuff that you see in other
Correct.
countries.
And then even look at Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Korea and Japan, right? They didn't win capitalism because they invented products. They all won capitalism because they went into finance and undercut every other country with finance. That's, well, more for Singapore, less for Korea. But that's how they won capitalism,
I think
right?
Taiwan is like a genius example of
Yeah,
public policy from elites, of them looking and saying, what is the market
To the
need
future.
in the world? The U.S. needs chips. We're going to become the United States chip factory. And
You know what our Korean dictator Park Chung-hee did? He wanted to build boats because he saw so much world trade happening and growing. What did
I
he
do.
Korea became the #1 shipbuilding country in the last 20 years because this guy saw that coming, and he just did what you do, build a shipbuilding industry.
Look at Samsung. Most people don't own stock in Samsung, but you should. It's one of the bigs. The people think it's just cell phones. It's not. They're building fighter jets. They're building the best of the best of everything.
Everything.
As much as I'm pro-democracy and anti-authoritarian and anti-monarchist, I will say I do have a little bit of a technocratic streak in me because a lot of
Lee Kuan Yew was a beast. Yes or no? He fucking lifted a country out of drug-addled poverty into one of the most productive countries in the world in fucking 30 years, bro.
Which country?
Singapore.
Oh,
Lee Kuan Yew.
yeah.
Oh,
He is the godfather of that country. Like,
He was on Charlie Kirk a lot. Not Charlie Kirk.
Yeah.
Charlie. What's
and
his
I
name?
think something
Charlie Rose, bro.
something
Charlie
that
Rose,
these
yeah.
leaders, something that these leaders get right is that they see they're pro-market, but only insofar as it's a tool that serves the benefit of the country.
Correct.
They're not like ideologically
Money first.
like
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It's not like ideologically pro-market. Like we're going to be pro-market at any cost and just hope that things work out. It's
Only in the
pro-market.
places where
Yeah,
it
exactly. It's a
benefits them
tool.
without a
Yeah.
loss, without a huge loss. Yes, that's
Exactly.
how it
Yeah.
should be. That's
I totally
like
agree.
if the that's what MAGA people really should be wanting and want, like that right there, and that's really what the right wing populism is really about, dude. Like, man. Look, even the Romans understood this because in their 300 years of the Republic, they had 70 dictators that the Senate voted and called upon and elected out of the Senate. Right? Which means that they recognize the need for someone to come in and balance the fact that all the Senate does is debate. And eventually they need a man of action to come in to fix all the stupid debates that can never be contended with because every faction becomes so factionated through democracy and debating that they can't agree on anything because everybody's just in their own self-interest. They don't care about anything else. And those factions become calcified to the point that there is no real dialogue, there's no back and forth, there's no policies being changed. It just becomes ossified.
Well, there's no morality, there's no ethics or virtue in these people passing these bills for trillions of dollars or tens of millions. It doesn't matter. They recognize go bust or go home. They don't give a fuck about America. They care about themselves. That's it.
The Roman elite destroyed their peasant class by importing so many slaves that the peasants got out-competed because they couldn't afford their farms anymore. And they all went to the cities and got their bread and circus, right? The gladiator fights.
And that's essentially CRT, BLM, LGBTQ.
That's what's happening right now. Right? So, man, like, if Americans want to understand where they can be in the future, read the Roman Republic, and you will see an Athenian democracy. And if you want to see populism, you'll see it in Greece when Cleisthenes and Pericles became populist leaders who were so influential that they took over the system and got everything that they wanted passed. That even happened in Greek democracy. And the fact that people think that, like in the ancient world, they did this as a matter of practicality, but Western liberals in the modern age see this as its ultimate evil that they have to stop. When ironically, FDR was the liberal fucking Caesar for them. FDR was their liberal dictator the first 100 days. He threatened the Supreme Court and Congress. He threatened the Congress in his inaugural speech.
Gio, this is the irony: is he's Mr. Monopoly, and he's acting like a socialist virtue signaler.
He replaced private monopolies with government-backed monopolies. That's all he did.
No, I mean he literally is the embodiment of Mr. Monopoly with a monocle and being a billionaire. He's a hypocrite. But that's exactly what politics is. Earlier.
One thing he did right was the TCC and the TVA building infrastructure using people who didn't have work because of the Great Depression.
Yeah,
was
that's
one thing
that was
they
pretty
had
cool.
done.
But that again is socialism, hardcore communism. I've been to those work.
No, because traditionally the armies of the past in other countries used to
Yeah,
help
that's
build
true.
infrastructure and then the people too. So actually, this is something that the army should have been helping doing, but we don't want to. We never in the past we didn't want to.
I've been to one of these giant work sites where they built basically a national park. It's in Colorado, and they built this giant swoon where they would take down the rock and all the mud and debris. Tens of thousands of people gathered to beautify this area, and people to this day, enjoy it and love it, and it's a lasting testament. But was it worth it? I really got to say, it's probably not worth it. Back then,
No, right. Yeah, I mean it's a hard line because if
Yeah.
it was, if it's something that happens every few years, it's not bad. It can't be the permanent policy, right? So if you have a dictator come in like FDR every 20 years, shits on the Congress, shits on the Supreme Court, whips them back into shape, fires as much of them he can, convince the people to fire as much of them as he can. But that's a little.
look,
harsh.
I want to repeat back something you mentioned.
But just real quick, but this is how Rome functioned. They would ossify over 10, 20, 30 years, and then they would have a dictator come in for 6 months, fix all their problems, and then go back to being the ossification process of the Senate. But
What?
they were trying to, they thought that they could hit a sweet spot where the Senate wouldn't be ossified in the first few years after a dictator, and they would actually, but no, that's not what happens. It just goes back to being
Earlier you said that Koreans have no political power in America, and instead they just organize churches. But that is political power. That is trolling politics. Religion trumps politics. Politics trumps religion. So Koreans in this country are hyper political because they use their church as a way of vote organizing and differentiating.
That's dying out too. All these younger generation millennials and after them.
Yeah, they're past all that. I agree. They're networked on their cell phone.
Americanized white suburban. They might as well just be like white suburban consumers.
See, churches don't make sense anymore because it's nothing but a communication network housed in one facility. Now it's all decentralized, just like Uber and dating and everything else. It's the world of decentralization. It's the reality of all decentralization. That is modern day business.
Decentralization, democratization, globalization, the fight between individual rights and collective rights, the fight between authority versus anti-authority. It's all these things simultaneously.
Gio, I thought it was a very interesting conversation earlier about how we could potentially start rebuilding like the lost third place civil society kind of thing.
You're on it right now, Kevin. It's called Clown House, bro. You're doing it right now. You are a groundbreaking revolutionary hero.
No, it has to be local. It has to be particular. It has to be physical, man.
I agree.
Well, you do it physical then.
Bro, do you know how many people ghost people on online when they ask for help? Like, do you know how many times that happens? And they just ghost an entire community because they don't want to help people. Like, this is the easiest place to ghost people.
Well, are you talking about tips or dollars in terms of people begging on here?
No, just helping as in, like if you had developed a friend group and a friendship, and then let's say, I don't know, you asked for help over something over time because you thought that you could trust this person. No, and there's a certain limit where they're your friend. They're your friend as far as that they'll listen to your bullshit, they'll laugh with you, they'll whatever, but it doesn't enter the real world. It's online alone. And when the moment it becomes a physical thing, a lot of people are like, oh, no, I'm good, bro.
Yeah, because there's a disappointment factor. Once you meet somebody in the real world, you're like, oh, you're not who I thought you were.
No, it's not just a meeting. It's just that I'm talking about when there's people in a small community near each other, they can always keep them in check. And I can ask something of you, and you kind of have to say yes. If I'm online and you ask me for a favor, it's much easier to say no, and then that extrapolates to every level of the relationship.
We kind of live in a Venmo culture in the sense of like, someone helps you out, and instead of entering these like long-term reciprocal relationships where it's like I do something for you, you do something for me, a payment is initiated, and then the contract is settled, more or less.
Yeah, it's all contractual.
I think that's like.
What do you think wait, hold up, Kevin. I'm sorry. What do you think the Constitution is? It's a guild agreement amongst 13 different types of guilds with different types of markets that they want to have.
No
That's
way,
what the
bro.
Constitution
It's a
is.
hypnosis document about enlightenment and freeing
No,
yourself.
think about it. No. Think about it. If you're a group of Protestant and Protestant merchants and different groups of Protestants who came here with different aims, the Puritans wanted a Puritan theocracy all over America. The Southerns wanted a Southern feudalistic society. The Quakers wanted Pennsylvania, where it was progressive as fuck. Men and women should have all equality, all types of ethnicities, all types of religions. Everyone's welcome here. Matter of fact, because of those policies, a lot of men from the North and South immigrated to Pennsylvania. And if you read the letters of immigrants in the 1730s to the 80s when they immigrated to Pennsylvania, they say that there is not really a culture for you to assimilate into, and that everybody went into their own separate enclaves and lived with religious or ethnic group.
It's a great compromise, isn't it? I mean, in terms of
Yes, but that's a trade agreement. My point is that is literally a trade agreement, like a trade federation, confederation would have.
But isn't it all? Look at the word though, constitution. I mean, it's an embodiment of a personal philosophy. It constitutes you. So it's the instruction manual for every American, and that's why I said the Declaration
Why
is.
do you think that older societies never had constitutions? Because the Constitution was already self-evident. Because the culture that was there and established a religion, they were considered the Constitution, the moral Constitution, the expectations of the king, the prior promises made by previous kings to the people that was passed down. Those were already the Constitution, so you didn't need one. When you start incorporating different peoples into nation states, like the French did, like the Poles did, and everybody else did, like empires tend to do, what happens is then you have to have a trade agreement at the top called the Constitution, rather than having a natural constitution of a preordained order that you know, because that's been your history in that area, in that kingdom for hundreds of years, right? This is why constitutions never existed before the 1700s.
Are you sure about that? What about the very first one, the Code of Hammurabi?
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, that's a more of a legal code. I mean, that's just like a.
Well, it's not a trade compact.
No. Hold up. That's not a constitution. A constitution would lay out how the form of government would work within that society and what it can and cannot do. That's a constitution. But
well, what?
I would say just real quick. I wouldn't like the Constitution is a modern invention from capitalism. It's just what it is.
No way. It's the progression of the English Constitution and their charters. It's a progressive.
Yeah, because they were a mercantilist empire, as were the Dutch. The Dutch.
Yeah, but what's wrong with that?
It's just what we're doing. Bro, I'm just explaining to you that they're all mercantilist trade organizations, and then like that's how they form society.
Right, but I don't understand. I mean, I'm just supporting it.
Wait, Emmett, do you know that, for instance, right? Poland and France were made up of people who had nothing to do with each other, like the Basques in the South, right? People who didn't even see themselves as the same group of people, who had nothing to do with each other, couldn't even understand each other, okay? The different provinces of France from the east to the south, only 25% of people in the nation state of France in the 1790s could speak French.
What was the percent? 20%?
25%.
Because, yeah, I mean, it's tribal.
Look, right, but they're trying to bring everybody together under a trade agreement amongst all these different groups of people.
Right.
That's their constitution.
This is the whole Mao. This is whole Chairman Mao thing. I mean, the Great Awakening, the Great Revolution.
Yes, exactly. He based all of this off of liberal ideas, bro. Read his little red book. Anyway, he even criticizes hyper-democracy and hyper-individualism of liberalism. He critiqued that in his little red book like 70 years ago, bro. He saw that coming because that happened in his own party, where the people became hyper-individualistic and democratized, and all these faults that we see in modern democracy in America, he saw it happening in the Red Party, and he wrote about it.
You know what's ironic is he's technically a Tibetan Buddhist terrorist because he
actually warned against wokeism. Did you know that? Because it happened in his party, in the Red Party. He wrote that if you care only about equality, the party members will never do anything unless everybody else has to do what he said. For example, when they were trying to bring grain to another area, everybody would only pick up 10 pounds because that was what the lightest woman could hold. And because she could only hold 10 pounds, every guy and every woman who could hold more than that said, I'm not holding more than that. We're supposed to be equal.
Yeah, that's the
Mouse was
epitome
like,
of the
Mao was
dilemma,
like,
the
holy
problems.
fucking shit, this is wokeism. Yeah, and he's like, I gotta stand this out in my party. Another thing that happened was in times of war, let's say there were 2 people injured. One of them had a grazed bullet wound that wasn't even that deep, a shallow wound, and another guy had his entire lower body blown off. The guy who had the graze would say he needed the stretcher as much as the guy with the half of his body blown up, because an injury is an injury, and we are all equal in the Red Party, and that they would fight until the stretcher would just leave. Hyper-equality and hyper-individualism was within the Maoist Red Party, and Mao wrote against it, and he's basically prophesizing, and not only, he's experiencing it, and then he's saying this has to be stumped out. And that exact thing happened in America over the last 100 years also. 150 years.
Well,
So he was actually trying to stop wokeism from happening.
have you ever read Saul Dielinski's Rules for Radicals?
Yeah, a while ago though, like 2000, like a while ago. So I don't
I
remember.
bought a first edition book from the 60s or whatever, 20s or 30s or whatever year it came out, and for like $100 or $200 because it's Hillary Clinton's favorite book. The whole beginning of the book is essentially an educational piece on Buddhism or Tibetan Buddhism or Zen philosophy. Or basically, it's all about getting no's to get to a yes. But it's a book about communication theory and how politics of the Tao, which is the way, which is a very subtle hypnosis of lies, where you can virtue signal and just what I'm trying to say is, like, with regards to your title, even look at Trudeau. He is the perfect embodiment of the psychological, pathological, psychotic politician who is well aware of advanced psychology. So he understands that, the medium is the message, that as long as you keep lying into the medium, it's better to always go far left and virtue signal all the way to World War III. It's a giant fucking Ponzi scheme, a giant fucking lie.
Cthulhu swims left, right? And look, this is a point that James Burnham made in his book, The Machiavellians, and he based these arguments off of Mosca. So Mosca's the one who Mosca and Machiavelli are the ones who made these arguments first. But what he says is, because we have become a civilization that is so against force and the use of force, what we've done is allowed the people who are good at convincing people with words, who are good at virtue signaling, who are good at convincing people and frauding people, we've let them have no checks and balances on them, and they've been able to become the leaders in our society. Whatever you have to say about violence, they know how to put a stop to things. Whereas fraudsters can never be put down, and they can always talk their way out of things. And that is leading into the very situation we're in right now, where all you have to do is talk slick, and you can get votes. This is a problem in our society. And our aversion to violence, constantly, all the time, our inability to rain justice and law and order onto criminals is why we can't have a liberal society. Because what it takes for you to have a liberal society is to maintain the law and order of the 1930s, 40s, 50s into perpetuity without changing that at all. All right? That is the only way a liberal society can maintain itself, because the institutions and laws that it creates are the only things keeping law and order, but it's not really that. It's actually the use of force. The willingness to send the National Guard to put down violent revolutions. So that, in reality, is the only thing that prevents your society from breaking apart by violent revolution. So this is why the conservatives always lose in our society, because conservatives are the only liberals, true liberals left. They don't want to interfere into the state as much as the progressives do. They wanted to compromise with the liberals.
So
every time they do, they lose all their rights, and liberals gain more of what they want every fucking time.
So let me ask you this: if we were LARPing as far left, liberal Democrats, and we got in and we infiltrated their system, and we were to, what I'm suggesting is that if we were to infiltrate, like, because we could sit here and opinionate all day long, we want to come up with plans. What I'm saying is infiltrate the Democrat Party as much as you possibly can. If we were to create like an instruction manual
And
for
they go
people.
as completely progressive as possible. So
No, you go as far left as possible. You go even further left.
That's what I'm saying. That's
Oh,
what I'm
I see.
saying.
Okay.
I mean, that's just accelerationism. Yeah.
Well, what I'm trying to say is like Putin says we're weaponizing the dollar.
My problem with that is that you calcify the culture of the people over 3 generations to all being leftists. That's the problem, and that there's no more rightists.
Well, right before we die, we surprise them with the aristocrats, where we tell them we scam them in order to scam the overall system. We release them from the lie, and then we start it all over again. What I'm saying is you can control the outcome of any situation because every situation is artificial. We are fish in a fishbowl. So
No, I don't disagree with you that we could do exactly what the liberals are doing, the conservatives, and the problem is that the liberals won in every institution. They've taken over every institution, starting from like the bottom to the top. First, they went in as judicial clerks. They became like progressive. What would you say? Mentees to all these mentors, right? They took their classes, right? They're generally in the social sciences. It's taken over. Then they start going into the bureaucratic positions. Then they start going into the institutional positions, right? They've already won that game. The conservatives in America are incapable of doing that because they're so principled on live and let live. And they actually believe the liberal lie of live and let live. They thought, hey, if we don't put our Christianity on them, they're not going to put their liberalism on us, and we can all have our own communities and just coexist.
well, I guess
If the liberals and the progressives had been able to stay out of the federal government and inject their politics into it, maybe it could, but it would have to happen in perpetuity without failing.
what I'm trying
The problem is that
I'm just trying to say we can get our cake and eat it too.
I don't disagree that we can go into government or infiltrate their side and do it, but it's going to come at costs and consequences too. Like not having a look at what's happened to the Conservative Party. They can't organize for shit. They can't do what the Democrats do. They can't knock on doors like Democrats do. They can't get bodies. They can't get people. Most of the right wingers are fucking boomers. Like what the fuck, dude? There's no organizational building. There's no multi-layer building. There's no NGOs and private organizations at the level that the Democrats have. The one thing that the conservatives do is to have think tanks, and the other is to get into the legal arguments in the Supreme Court and win that way. That's their only tool in the bag because they're so fucking liberal and principled. They'll say shit like, I'll defend the liberal and leftist and Yankees' right to free speech, but if I hear a right winger, I'm gonna punch him in the face. A far right winger, I'm gonna punch him in the face.
I'll tell you.
Even the moderate right winger carries water for the socialists, the communists.
Yeah, I get it. You said that
every level
earlier.
of it.
I get it. Listen to this theory, okay? America will always stand and will only continue clown world. Clown world will perpetuate. And do you know what supports it all? It's not the Federal Reserve. It's the Chinese psychology. Because generations after generations of Chinese will continue to use their little hands and make shit for white people and now black and brown and everybody else in the West. Because the Chinese are like robots and they're emotionally devoid. And that's why they have the government they and the super society that they have.
CRT, I gotta push back on this Bugman thing because the reason they seem like Bugman to you is because they've achieved what liberals have been trying to do over the last. They've been doing that over the last.
But it's a.
Hold up. Because they invented meritocracy and bureaucracy 2,000 years ago, they've been doing what liberals do to bureaucratize everything for a long time, and then they radically shifted fast forward during the communist revolution with the cultural revolution, which is to destroy the core old habits, old religions, old traditions, old ideas, get rid of all of those, which means old religions, Confucianism, all of that is deracinated. The irony in America is that the Americans
But that was just the propaganda.
Hold up. The Americans did it to themselves with the cultural revolution, the sexual revolution. They did it to themselves.
I know, but what I'm saying is that the Chinese leadership still use the Confucian information and the Taoist information to rule the population.
They use everything. Yeah, that's what liberal nation states do. They take old ideas and make it serve the state. So if you listen to, like, for instance, how Chinese have their own version of like how Korea is one of their provinces historically, and then Koreans will be like, no, we're from like the Manchus, Siberian people, and we're completely different from the Chinese. They all have their own narrative crafted by their liberal government since the 1920s and 50s. So starting in the 1917 with Chiang Kai-shek, all the way with Mao, they're crafting their own idea, and into now with Xi Jinping with a civilizational state, they're taking all the things from the past and using it for their own reason to unify the people under national identity. So you see this with every nation state, including France, Poland, as a reaction against like the era of empires, which was the Ottoman Empire, the British and the French in the 1850s. The nation states was a reaction against it, right? The Serbian sovereignty movement was a reaction against the Austro-Hungarian Empire, right? They wanted their sovereignty, they were tired of being ruled, blah, 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 blah. All these nation states then are liberal constructions of let's say, the trade agreement constitutions that are just uniting all the people who live in their area who have nothing to do with each other, and the only thing they agree on is making money together. Right? That's it.
Well, what do you
That
think about?
That explains like 90% of what you're asking.
What do you think about the in terms of like the British withdrawal from their empire and essentially leaving corporate legal structure and smaller contingencies and lessening the burden, balancing the books?
What is the Catholic Church except the wealth of the Roman Empire and some of its ideas like kept into the Catholic Church, right? The Catholic Church is the last, what would you say, like
they're the last independent charter. They have their own statehood. It's just unbelievable.
No, I'm not even talking about that. I'm more talking about how they're the last, there's a word I'm looking for.
Is it vestige?
Yeah, vestige of Rome. They are the last vestige of Rome. They have the
They're the Byzantine Empire, still here today with us.
Correct.
Pope is a king.
Correct.
He's not the head of a church. He's a goddamn king.
In some ways, in most ways, not really anymore. They're not. The Pope isn't as influential.
I'm just saying historically, that is a kingship.
Some of the popes recently have become mouthpieces for the liberals, neoliberals, essentially. That's all they are.
Are you kidding? The current pope's a goddamn trans, CRT, BLM, LGBTQ, everything. He's a fucking weird pedo motherfucker.
Like Ratzinger was really good, but since then they've all been soft. And unfortunately, while they were saying, "Hey, this is going to bring in more young people," it hasn't. Right? So, but my point isn't about the Catholic Church, dude. I'm just saying that, just like you're saying that the British Empire turned into this legalist. That was already partially what they were doing back in the day. Same with the Dutch mercantilist empire with the Dutch East India Trading Company. This is literally it's like the same strain of just liberal capitalism, and it's just shifted from colonialism into a global trade. That's the only difference here. Bro, look at the Dutch, okay? The Dutch were so capitalistic that they were willing to do things that the other European countries were not willing to do. For example, when all the European powers went to Shanghai and were trying to get China to open up and trade with them, the emperor was saying, "Look, I'll only allow the trade between our countries if your ambassador bows to me and kowtows to me." That's where the word kowtow comes from. And if you admit that I'm an emperor who is above your own country's king, then I will do trade with you. All the other European powers said, "Fuck you, we're not bowing to you. We have our own king to bow to." The Dutch was like, "Wait, that's all I have to do?" They bowed. And then they got they got the first trade agreements as a European country in China. They were willing to lick boots and didn't care about honor, didn't care about having pride in your own country and your own king. They were willing to throw their own country below that of China just to trade with them, because it would mean that they would win in Europe. That's capitalism right there. That's mercantilist capitalism right there. Putting the interest of money above your own national's self-respect. Who needs self-respect when you care about money more? And I'm trying to explain to you that America is nothing but a clone of those, but a different strain, an American progressive strain of that. So these are all things that have been repeated throughout history, and we're just following the same mistakes again and again and again. I'm gonna play you two clips to show you how repetitive history is, okay? This is Adams and Jefferson discussing what kind of treaty America should have with Europe. And when you hear Jefferson's idea, Edmund, you're gonna call him a commie, neoliberal, American exceptionalist. And let's see what you say at the end of this.
Tended to in Europe, but force. But Jefferson, the enlightened dreamer, hadn't given up. In 1785, he asked Adams what he thought of his draft of a model treaty to be presented to the courts of England and France. He admitted that the treaty went beyond our powers, and beyond the powers of Congress too. But unfortunately, it also went beyond the powers of possibility. It was truly radical. It not only proposed the free flow of commerce between the two signatory nations, but also provided that the intercourse between all the subjects and citizens of the two parties shall be free and unrestrained. While traveling in each other's territory, the peoples of each nation would be considered to every intent and purpose as members of the nation where they are, entitled to all the protections, rights, and advantages of the natives of the other nation, but without any requirement for religious conformity. The signatory nations might confine their public offices to natives. Otherwise, this treaty that placed natives and aliens on an equal footing promised a mutuality of citizenship among nations. It was the fulfillment of an enlightened vision of a world that would exist virtually without borders. Adams politely told Jefferson that his model treaty was a fine, idealistic effort, but unfortunately it was not appropriate to the realities of European politics. We must not, my friend, be the bubbles of our own liberal sentiments. If we cannot obtain reciprocal liberality, we must adopt reciprocal prohibitions, exclusions, monopolies, and imposts. Our offers have been fair, more than fair. If they are rejected, we must not be dupes. By 1787, Adams had become convinced, as he told Jefferson, that neither philosophy, nor religion, nor morality, nor wisdom, nor interest will ever govern nations or parties against their vanity, their pride, their resentments or revenges, or their avarice or ambitions. Nothing but force and power and strength can restrain them. In describing personal passions to nations in this peculiar manner, Adams was merely expressing his deepening understanding of himself and his fellow human beings. In the end, Adams's realism turned out to be more accurate than Jefferson's enlightened vision. Only 3 states, Sweden, Prussia, and Morocco, peripheral powers with little overseas trade, agreed to sign liberal commercial treaties with the United States, none of which involved more than most favored nation commercial relations. Most European states were indifferent to the Americans' enlightened ideas of commerce, ignorant, said Jefferson, to the power of American commerce.
So, in other words, Jefferson wanted the neoliberal, right, globalist, multi-democracy alliance, trade federation in the 1800s, okay? 200 years ago, right? That was his vision of American trade policy. He thought that people of other countries that we traded with should be able to come to America and vote without being a citizen. Basically open borders with all our allies. What is he if not a globalist fucking like neoliberal in the modern sense? You think this is a new idea? This was literally in our founder's brain. This is literally his words. Edmund. Hello? Edmund, are you there? I guess not. Okay. I'm gonna play the other clip then. Brian, are you there? Alright, I'm gonna play the clip.
It's a bit more controversial how Athenian men regarded Athenian women. Thucydides infamously reported Pericles to have said, at the end of his funeral oration, that female excellence meant to be least talked about among the men, whether for good or for bad. In keeping with that, average female citizens were rarely talked about in Athenian literature. Aristotle opened his Politics, claiming that, while on one hand, men and women need each other for reproduction, on the other hand, some are naturally rulers, and others are naturally ruled. Rulers, he says, use their minds, and the ruled use their bodies, which seems to be implying that men are naturally a ruling class over women. Since women weren't invited into politics, that seems at least fairly representative of Athenian public opinion. So this was a deeply patriarchal society. The woman's place was understood to be not in politics, but in the home, out of sight. As probably the strongest piece of evidence for that, we don't even know the name of Pericles' wife.
Wait, I played the wrong clip. My bad. It was to go on after that. Hold on 1 second.
Domestic pressures. If someone was causing a lot of trouble in Athens, and the Athenian public wanted them gone, they had the means to do it. I think it's worth reflecting on that process, and what it seems to say about Athenian society. When the Athenians wanted someone gone, they didn't kill them, and they didn't throw them in jail, never to be seen again. Instead, they just forced them to leave for 10 years, and after that 10 years, they'd be allowed to come back. So it was a fundamentally peaceful process, and I think a simple one. That being said, there is some evidence of fraud during those ostracisms, so the process might have sometimes been manipulated. Illiterate voters, for example, might have been used for political purposes. So, what happened to this system? What happened to Athenian democracy? Why do we talk about it in the past tense? Well, democracy in Athens became expensive. The assembly voted to institute pay for more and more public positions, namely in the military and the jury. Money for those positions had to come from somewhere, and Athens found the answer in empire. So democracy in Athens came to depend on empire. They increasingly stretched their power over the rest of Greece. They also sent ambitious campaigns abroad to Egypt and Sicily. Things reached a breaking point. Sentiment in Greece turned against the Athenians. Resistance to Athenian policy came from nearly every state in Greece. The viability of democracy was also an open question in Athenian time. It was notably rejected by aristocrats and the upper class. That led to divisions at home and the lack of intellectual support from many of the brightest minds at the time, like Plato, Socrates, and Aristotle. By Aristotle's time, the most extreme oligarchs were reported to have sworn the following oath: I will be evil-minded to the demos, and will plot whatever evil I can against them. Athens would go on to suffer a string of defeats that would lead to its fall. The end of the line for the old-style Athenian democracy came in 321, when Athens, subordinated under Macedon, added a wealth criterion for citizenship. Democracy disappeared in Athens and wouldn't reappear for thousands of years, this time in a modern form, influenced by the United States. We're about to turn our attention there, but I'd like to close this section out by reading a speech that Pericles was reported to give to the citizens of Athens. It was a dark time in the city.
So even in Athenian democracy, they became an empire. The people voted in more bureaucratic jobs so that they would have middle-class jobs. And to sustain that empire, to sustain that bureaucratic system, they had to expand, invade Sicily and Egypt, right? Take their resources so they could continue that bloated federal government in modern terms. They voted in more jobs in the jury and the military, which was their bureaucracies. And that led to them having to expand. And then it says every state was against this within the Athenian Empire, which was all the Greek states together at the time. And then the upper class were against it, the aristocrats were against it, and the intellectuals were against it at that time. In our time, the aristocrats are for it, the intellectuals are for it, and the elites are for it. So, ironically, at least the Greek upper class realized that democracy had forced them into this situation. And we are just repeating the same mistake that they did.
Yo, what's up, brother?
What's up, bro?
Shit, I didn't troll you earlier. I was kind of listening to you.
very scary how that parallels our time right now. Very scary. Oh yeah, what happened to the at the end of Athenian democracy? They added a wealth criteria to fight against Macedonia to vote. A wealth criteria to vote. So they went back to elected Aristocracy. Lou, are you there, or am I gonna close the room? Are you there? Because no one else is really here on the stage, bro. No diggity. No diggity. I figured. Might as well end the room then. Yeah, thanks for joining us. Good conversation here.
I have seen you, Suki. I know you. Come on.
Guys, you got this out. Let's calm down. Let's calm down. Let's
Baby,
calm down.
calm down. Bro, I'm telling you, Daniel, right?
Hello, guys. How are you guys doing?
Oh, looking ass look like you're 2 pounds soaking wet, like you like 50 kilo maybe. Bitch, you need to shut your pussy ass up before I fucking knock your chest through. Pussy ass bitch.
Really don't.
Cocksucker.
Well, stop.
It's not cocksucker. Dick sucker. You fucking stupid ass.
Doc, take your medicine.
Please, before you have a seizure here.
Your mom is vagina juice?
No. Before you're having a seizure, Uncle Dog, and you're living a lie.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, again, this is a very interesting conversation, and I think it sounds to me like if we can sort of tease out an agreement between the two positions, is that the things that determine whatever is true is the context in which we're talking about. And I think that's critical, that we don't come to, even when we think we're sort of discovering what the reality is like, all of that happens under some heading of a context in which we are able to discover those things. So I wonder if that's a point of agreement, that the context rules here.
Yeah, and what happens is you can, how far can you expand your context, right? I used to ask this question all the time, how big is your tribe? Are you able to address humanity, or do you need to only address your congregation, and people outside your congregation are not going to be able to parse out or agree with what you're saying? And that's the art, in my opinion, of communication, of running clubhouse rooms, right? Being able to communicate your ideas in a way and use a language that is accessible to most people, and to listen to people within their context, which is one of the toughest things. I've had to hang out on clubhouse rooms forever for me to understand where they're coming from, to understand all this scientific, philosophical lingo. When I first joined Clubhouse, I could barely engage because I was like, what are they talking about? What is epistemology? What is ontology? Yeah, right. There's so many things that are being discussed, and as we train ourselves to listen, and also, having for an atheist to have knowledge about religions, especially if you want to engage with spiritual people, is a must, right? If you want to debate, you can't just assume that what you know about Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Islam is what is true. Just because you've read it on one book or heard it from someone, it doesn't mean that the person who's going to come in shares that truth. They have their own truth or their own subjective perception of what is true, right? Hermes, welcome to the room. Welcome to the stage. How are you, brother?
Hola, amigos. Hoy es el día de tacos y cerveza.
Sorry, tacos is on Tuesdays. You got tacos any day, but tacos are Tuesdays.
Right. So for Fridays, you just add cerveza.